Hello and thank you for joining us. Last week we covered simplifying customer support operations. We briefly touched upon automation. Today we're going to deep dive into automation use cases. Once again, my name is Krishna. I specialize in value selling at Vtiger. I also have my colleagues online to answer any questions on chat. So let's look at today's agenda. Let's start off by reviewing some findings on how customer support influences loyalty. We can then look at how automation can help customer support teams. We'll then review Vtiger automation capabilities. I'll then show you how to leverage Vtiger for popular automation scenarios. And then I'll share some tips on how to be judicious with workflows. Then I'll leave some room for Q&A. But please use the chat channel to interact with my colleagues. Okay, most of us can relate to this. Let's look at some findings. So if your customer support team resolves issues in your customer's favor, so they're likely to do business with you again 70% of the time. Over 90% of unhappy customers will not do business with you again. Failure to resolve an issue in a timely manner is one of the top reasons for customer churn. But both quality and timeliness of responses matter. 41% of customers expect an email response within 6 hours. 24 hours or less is widely considered an acceptable email response time. But what your customer support team can do is they can delight customers by responding within an hour and resolving issues on first response. So every interaction a customer support agent has with customers is an opportunity to improve brand perception. And it is critical to ensure agents are able to focus on these interactions. Automation with well-defined processes can have a measurable impact on the quality and timeliness of agent responses. So how can automation help? So let's look at a few scenarios and shortcomings from manual processes. I'll put these on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we look at benefits from automated processes. So these are just guidelines, and I have highlighted some average figures for efficiency metrics. I encourage you to determine these figures for your support team. Case 1. Let's say it takes 30 minutes for cases to get assigned. So this would involve routing to the right group and then routing to the right agent within that group. Let's say this takes 30 minutes. If you automate this, agents will have up to 30 minutes more to resolve cases. Scenario 2. Let's say it takes 2 minutes of supervisor time to actually assign each case. The supervisor has to manually route the case to the group, and then the case has to be assigned manually to an agent within that group. So if you automate this, supervisors can save over 3 hours for every 100 cases they route and assign manually. Scenario 3. Let's say agents miss targets 30% of the time because they are unaware that the case was due within half hour or within 1 hour. This includes accepting a case within a threshold time. Let's say you automate this. With alerts, agents are more likely to fulfill targets for most of these cases. Scenario 4. Each case will have ad hoc tasks like closing, waiting unresolved cases, reopening cases, sending acknowledgements, etc. So these can take up to 6 minutes per case. If you automate all of these, agents save 1 hour for every 10 cases they work on. Also, automation of these repetitive tasks allows agents to focus on resolving cases. Incorrect routing and assignments. So with manual intervention, this is inevitable. Supervisors are likely to assign and route cases to wrong groups and wrong agents. So this increases the burden on agents, and it also increases resolution times drastically. If you were to automate assignments and routing, you can prevent inefficiencies resulting from human errors. Peak hour traffic can play havoc on supervisors. Suddenly they have to route and assign hundreds of cases instead of tens of cases in an hour. So this drastically increases human errors. So with automation, you can eliminate peak hour bottlenecks resulting from manual tasks. Let's define what automation comprises of in Vtiger. Automation comprises of two components, conditions and actions. When predefined conditions are met, the system has to automatically perform predefined actions. Let's look at examples for conditions. We have two types of conditions in Vtiger. One is a time-bound condition. If a case remains unassigned for greater than 1 hour, this is an example of a time-bound condition. The second type of condition is an event. If a priority of a case is changed to high, this would be an event. Actions could be, you can assign a case to a group, you can notify support supervisor, you can create a task. Depending on the condition, you can define what actions you want to perform. So actions triggered by time-bound conditions run within an hour. So we check the conditions every hour, and if the conditions are met, the actions will be executed. Example of a time-bound condition is case remains unassigned, and the action could be set priority to high. So the system checks for this condition every hour, whereas actions triggered by events happen in real time. For example, if the case type is set to VIP, if the action associated with this condition is assign the case to VIP team, this action will be executed in real time after the condition is met. You can combine conditions with and/or logical operators. Let's look at an example for OR conditions. You can take actions based on the priority, if the priority is urgent or immediate. You can combine two conditions with an AND. If the case is reopened and the customer is VIP, take an action. You can combine both AND and OR. For example, you can look at the priority of the case, if it is urgent or immediate, and the case is reopened. So the OR conditions is the priority is urgent or immediate, and the AND condition is the case is reopened. We'll look at an example to highlight all of these combinations. You can choose to perform actions only the first time or every time conditions are met. Case routing, you may want to perform only on creation, whereas you may want to escalate to supervisor every time a case is reopened. So let's jump into Vtiger and look at some of the workflows that capture these conditions and actions. So these are all the workflows that I have configured for cases. So I have 8 workflows, and we're going to go through each one of them. So let's look at this workflow that basically notifies a supervisor when critical VIP cases are not assigned within 1 hour or they're not accepted within 2 hours. So this combines and/or combinations. It also combines a time-bound condition and an event. So when we go here, so we mark this status as active. That means the workflow is active, and when conditions are met, actions will be performed. So workflow trigger would be time interval. Once you have a time-bound condition, you have to choose the time interval as the trigger workflow on choice. The conditions would be checked every hour. So let's look at the all conditions, right? So the organization needs to be a VIP customer, and the priority should be either urgent or high. So both these conditions need to be satisfied. And then these are the any conditions, which means that either of these conditions has to be true. So the case has not been assigned for more than 1 hour, or the case has not been accepted after assignment for more than 2 hours. So if all these conditions are met, we notify the supervisor saying that the case, a VIP high priority, or urgent or high priority case from a VIP customer has either been not assigned within an hour or has not been accepted by an agent within 2 hours. So all of these conditions you can combine. You can combine and you can also combine time-based and event-based conditions. Now that we've looked at one workflow that combines a lot of different types of conditions, let's look at other flexibility that Vtiger automation capabilities offer you. You can use over 100 fields in your conditions. You can use the direct case fields, and you can also use associated contact and organization fields that pertain to the case. You can also add custom fields to contacts and organizations and cases. You can use these fields as conditions in your workflows. Examples of case fields. So these are the fields that pertain directly to the case: priority, status, SLA, etc. Whereas associated fields are the fields that are indirectly connected to the case. One example is a contact type that has raised the issue. It could be an analyst, it could be a competitor, it could be a partner, prospect. You can also use customer industry. It could be healthcare, finance, software as a service, etc. And you can also key off of customer type that is requesting the case. It could be VIP, high value, or standard. So let's look at how to use some of these direct case fields and also associated fields. We're going to use a direct case field in this workflow. So what we're trying to do here is set the case status to reopen after customer reply to a resolved case within 72 hours. An agent has marked the case resolved, and the customer rejects the resolution by replying to the resolution message. And what Vtiger does by default is it puts the case back into open. But if you wanted to put the case in reopen state, you can leverage this workflow. So here it's a event-based workflow. So we're going to trigger off of case updated. So you want to perform this action every time. Every time a case is resolved and the customer rejects it, you want to put the case to reopen. So you would say every time a case is updated, including creation, you want to run this workflow. And let's look at the conditions. All of these conditions need to be met. So the status has changed from resolved to open. And the action would be you want to set the status of the case to reopen. So this is a workflow that uses direct case fields. Now let's look at an example that uses an associated case field. So here what we are trying to do is when a case is raised by an analyst. So we want to assign that case to analyst relations. This we would do only on case creation. We check the contact type, which is an analyst. We assign the case to analyst relations. Let's look at one more. Here we are routing cases from VIP customers to VIP support team. This again, we are leveraging an associated field of the case. So this we would execute on case creation, and we check if the customer is VIP. If the customer is VIP, we assign the case to VIP support. So we looked at some ways to leverage direct case fields and also associated case fields in conditions and how to apply specific actions when these conditions are met. Now let's look at how you can automate routing of cases to groups. So you can base it on a functional routing, which means that a case will be routed based on what it pertains to. If it pertains to pricing, you can forward the case to marketing. If it pertains to technical issues, you can forward it to tech support. If it's billing, you can send them to accounting, etc. The second way to route cases would be based on product. If you have a lot of products in your portfolio and if they're all not completely related, you may want to have specific product teams to support specific products. The third option is basing it on customers. If you want to offer differentiated support for VIP customers, this is something you may want to consider. It may also be based on region. If you have a global customer base and if you need localized support for each of these regions where you sell products, you may want to leverage localized support teams to account for time zones, cultural differences, etc. You can also use channel. It's common these days to have Twitter support. You have a team that monitors a Twitter channel. As and when issues are raised on Twitter by your customers, you respond to those issues directly on Twitter. That's one example. You can also route cases that are raised by chat to a support team that handles chat support. Finally, you can also leverage the classic L1, L2, L3. L1 forms your frontline support, so general queries are usually answered by L1, and issues that are challenging for L1 to answer are usually routed to L2, and deeper technical queries depend on experts. So you have to decide what fits your business best. Let's look at some examples now. So here I've configured a workflow to route cases that are generated on Twitter to our social media support team. So what we're going to do here is that this should be on case creation. We will check the channel that was used to create the case. If the channel is social, we route the case to the social media support team. Let's look at another example. So this is functional routing. This we covered briefly in part 1. So we want to route login issues to IT support. On case creation, we would inspect the summary and the case body to see if it contains the terms login or password. If either of these conditions are met, we would route the case to IT support. We discussed how to automate routing of cases to groups. Now let's look at how to assign cases to agents within groups automatically. So popular methods include round robin and least loaded. So round robin is a simple distribution algorithm. So you allocate cases as they arrive in a serial fashion to your agents within the group. And least loaded algorithm uses the agent backlog to determine who to assign the cases to. So this is a mock-up of round robin and least loaded agent configuration screen. So here we have IT support, we have payroll support, benefits support, and free agents. Free agents are those who don't belong to any group. So you would choose what algorithm you want to use to assign cases. So here for IT support, we have chosen round robin, and I want to apply this to all the agents, so I would check for the entire group. Whereas for payroll support, we have chosen least loaded, and I want to choose specific agents for whom I want to assign cases using the least loaded algorithm. Round robin, we have a ETA of Q2 2016. Agent availability for automated assignment. This is something that we are going to add on top of round robin. So this is going to consider shift hours, holiday schedules, and backlog thresholds before assigning cases to agents based on either round robin or least loaded. And least loaded algorithm, we have an ETF Q3 2016. So let's look at automation for support team efficiency. We looked at how to automatically route cases to groups. We looked at how to automatically assign cases to agents within groups. Now let's look at a few more scenarios where automations can help. So let's say you don't have automated assignment for a certain category of cases, but you still want to ensure cases are assigned within a pre-configured time. The second scenario is if the case is not accepted within a pre-configured time. A use case for this would be we want to ensure critical VIP cases are assigned within 1 hour and accepted within 2 hours. And closing and resolve and waiting cases after 72 hours. This is a good practice to follow. Instead of expecting customers to approve or reject cases, you can have a workflow that automatically closes resolved and waiting cases after 72 hours. So you give your customers 72 hours to accept a resolution. So let's look at these workflows in Vtiger. And here we have close waiting cases after 48 hours. So the same applies to resolved cases. Here what we're doing is, if a case is waiting on customer for over 48 hours, and if there's no response from the customer, we want to close the case automatically. That means every time the case is updated, we want to check the condition. And we want to execute this only the first time conditions are met. Because once cases are closed, they cannot be reopened. So we check the status, hours since wait for customer. If it's 48, and you close the case. Let's look at some default automations that Vtiger supports. So on case creation, from inbound emails to your support inbox, you can choose to create cases. We have SLA alerts to ensure agents are informed of impending deadlines, and escalations, so that when SLAs or deadlines are violated, you know, escalate cases to supervisors and other stakeholders. So let's look at how these are configured in Vtiger. So what we will do is we will go to settings, and we'll go to automation, and we'll select mailroom, and we'll look at create update cases. So what we've done here is every time an email is received into this Vtiger inbox, we will create a case, and you can also match the organization and update the organization field of the case. So what we do is for each organization, we have a field called email domain. If that email domain matches the email domain of the case, then we automatically update the organization. This is very useful so that you don't have to manually update the organization field when a case comes in from a customer who's already in your system. You can also create a contact. Then you have the option to assign the case to a default group. You can also assign it to a default user, and you can assign a default SLA. Okay, now let's look at the SLA alerts and escalations. Let's look at the SLA policy we had configured in our first session. So here we have chosen alerts and escalations for immediate cases. What does this actually do? When you select alert, it allows you to send an alert message 30 minutes before to the assigned user of the case that an SLA is due in half hour. Then let's look at escalations. Here what we're doing, 30 minutes after an SLA is violated, we want to escalate this situation to the supervisor of the owner of the case. We also have one more default automation capability that's built into Vtiger. It's called hours since last update. So it allows you to look at all the cases that was not updated in a specific amount of time. For example, you may want to know all cases that have not been updated for 24 hours. Let's see how this is configured in Vtiger. So this is configured as a part of notifications. So you'd go here and you would go to configure notifications. What this does is for cases that are inactive or idle for 1 day, we send a message via email and also through the notification center in digest mode. So you're going to see all the cases that have been inactive for over 24 hours every day. So let's see how to be judicious with automation. So base your analysis on facts. Compare 3 months of data with and without automation, and you want to measure the key metrics that are important to your support operations. So avoid conflicting workflows. Let me give you an example. Let's say you configure a workflow to assign cases from VIP customers to VIP support. And then you have another workflow to assign cases that are created on social media to social media support team. Let's say this is the sequence of the two workflows. And there is a case that's created on social media from a VIP customer. So the first workflow will assign that case to VIP support. Then the second workflow will reassign that same case to social media support team. So you want to ensure you understand the desired outcome for this. If you don't want the case to be assigned to social media support team, you want to exclude VIP customers from this second workflow. So no scheduled workflow limits. They run every hour. You want to plan for the worst case scenario. Okay. So don't overuse automated responses. If customers see a lot of automated messages, the personal touch kind of goes out the window. So you want to be very judicious in what you want to automate. You may want to automate only required acknowledgements. Otherwise, responses should be from agents with meaningful information, resolutions or responses that pertain to the case. Okay, so that is all I had for today's webinar. We will now take questions.